I'm going to be looking at Matthew 18, verses 5 through 14 this morning. Before we jump into the text, though, we need to set the stage because there's a context. You know, every passage has a home, it has a context, and that context helps determine the meaning, and it helps us fully understand it. That's why we are firmly committed to working through books of Scripture passage by passage, because it forces us to deal with them as they were written, as they were inspired to be read and to be studied and to be learned from, and there's great value and benefit in it. So before we look at what's going on in this particular passage, we need to look at where we are, because it kind of jumps in the middle of a situation going on. If you recall the previous passage at the end of Matthew 17 and very beginning of 18, there's this issue over greatness and what it is to be great in the kingdom, and the disciples are coming at it from all the wrong perspective. They've been arguing over who's the greatest, and they're meaning who's the greatest among them, particularly because Jesus just told them he's going to die, and they're thinking, well, if he's going to die, and they're distressed about it, but somebody needs to carry the messianic movement on. So Jesus, which one of us is the greatest? And Jesus doesn't rebuke them for the thought of wanting to be great and all that, but what he does is he grabs a little child, what would be considered one of the most insignificant people in their culture. He brings the child in the midst of them and says, if you want to be great, you need to become like this. This obscure, anonymous, insignificant person. Be like them, and then you'll become great in the kingdom, because greatness is not about calling the shots, running the show, determining the course of things. It's not about being served, it's about serving. And that's what it is. So while this child is still in the midst of them, that's the context we're dealing with. It's still the group, the 12, with this child in the midst of them. Jesus continues with what he's saying, so if you would stand, please. We're going to pick up in Matthew 18, verse 5. Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. That's a little harsh. Don't you think? We think that's harsh, but if we think that's too harsh, it's because we grossly underestimate his love and care for the little ones. You know how much you can tell how serious something is by how severe the warning is. Parents, when your kids do something little, hey, don't do that, or, I'll do whatever. But if it's something serious, the I'll do, it gets a lot more serious, and then we say things we know we're never going to do, but we're trying to get a point across. Woe to the world for temptations to sin. For it is necessary that temptations come, but woe to the one by whom the temptation comes. And if your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life crippled or lame than with 2 hands or 2 feet to be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It's better for you to enter life with 1 eye than with 2 eyes to be thrown into the hell of fire. See that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I tell you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly, I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it is not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. You may be seated. Jesus gets serious. He gets real serious because he really cares about the little ones. And he's essentially encouraging us here to take on his heart, the heart of the Father for the little ones. We need to be looking out for the little ones. And Jesus shifts here. In the beginning, in verse 5, he's still talking about that particular child. He says, whoever receives one such child as this one that maybe, he's standing there with his hands on or has his arm around because the child is still in the midst of them. But then he shifts from speaking about a child to a little one. And that term little one is essentially, we get the word micro as a prefix, like you get the little, remember micro machines, little cars, and the micro machine guy in the commercials that talked super fast. It was unbelievable. But micro means teeny tiny, a microscope, so you can see tiny things. Well, the little ones, the micros, are not just little in stature, but little in status, little in significance. And so he's broadening his scope here from just insignificant children to all of the insignificant ones that the world overlooks. The people that the world considers to be of no value, of no importance, of no significance, of no worth, the ones that are overlooked, despised, rejected, ignored, neglected. When we think of little ones in our society, there are still a lot of people who view children as little ones, like they don't belong here, they don't have a place here. You often hear children should be seen, not heard. Some I've even heard say children shouldn't even be seen. Just have them away somewhere else. But there's more. There's the poor. A lot of times the poor people are just cast off to the side. They're too low status. They don't rate to be in our party. They shouldn't be around here. They may not be dressed the best. Maybe they smell a little bit. They're kind of taking the class of our group down. Let's just not have them here. The uneducated. We don't really want them around. They're kind of idiots. We don't want them. The elderly. Our culture has a real problem with the elderly. And you see it. The elderly are neglected, they're disrespected, they're ignored. And I don't think it's anything new to this generation, but the younger generation always tends to disregard and disrespect and devalue the elderly. That's just a thing. That's the way that cultures tend to go, and ours is certainly there. What about those with special needs? Often we ignore them. We brush them off to the side. We say, they can't comprehend anyway, just get them out of here. Or if they have physical needs, that's going to cause so much of extra headache to deal with their handicap and things. We can't do that. Just get them out of here. Think about it. And there are all sorts of other categories of people. The humble, the meek, the shy. The ones that if you're not going to toot your own horn, nobody else will, so just get them out of here. If they're not going to stand up for themselves, why should we stand up for them? If they want it, they need to go get it. And if they're not willing to go get it, they're lost. That's the mindset of our culture. But those are the insignificant ones that Jesus gives the greatest warning to. Because not only is Jesus saying that those little ones are really the greatest in the kingdom. We tend to think like the young and the beautiful and the wealthy and the statused people are the glamorous ones. Jesus says, forget all that. The little ones are the greatest, and they warrant our attention. They do. Not just for us to not overlook them, but for us to be intentional about seeing them. And Jesus does not take kindly to their mistreatment. The Father does not take kindly to their mistreatment. Again, you look at the severity of the warnings here, Jesus' tone gets real harsh real fast, and it never backs off because he will not tolerate it. When you want to see a husband or a father get worked up real fast, touch their wife or their children. You'll see that come out. That's why we talk about mama bear coming out. Yeah, you touch a kid, watch what a mom does. But that's how the Father is. These are the ones that he holds in such such special value, such a special place in his heart, that he says, if anybody leads one of them to, sin is not the best translation of that. It's really to stumble, to fall away. Those who believe in him, these little ones within the church, okay, he's talking about the insignificant ones who believe in him. If anybody causes them to stumble and fall away from him, it's over for you. He says it'd be better if you had a gigantic millstone that was big enough that it needed an animal to be hooked up to it to pull it, to make it go around the circle and grind stuff. Tie it around your neck, drop them off in the water. That's what Jesus is saying. And then he goes on to talk about the temptations. And we always tend to personalize this, think about our own temptations to sin, but I don't think that's the best way to take it, because it's in the context both before and after of care for little ones. And it would be weird for him to say, look after the little ones, deal with your own sin, look after the little ones. No, he's talking about sin in regards to sin that would lead little ones astray. There's a context for that. But he doesn't take very kindly to it. So as Jesus loves them and cares for them and notices them and gives them special treatment, not lesser treatment, we need to do the same. If we've said we're following Jesus, we need to follow Jesus. We need to do what he does. We need to imitate him. And as we see this, we're going to look at 3 different ways that Jesus points out we need to engage the little ones. First off, by welcoming them. Secondly, by protecting them. And then third, from rescuing them when they begin to wander. Because remember, this is about believers here, not reaching out the little ones in the world, but this is primarily about the believing little ones within our people. So first, we need to welcome the little ones. We need to reach out to them. We need to engage them. And there is somewhat of a touch towards maybe those that are not in the community yet. He hasn't got to that point of those who believe in him. But he says in verse 5, whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. To receive them is to welcome them. To welcome them in, to bring them into the community of believers. And it's a contrast with causing them to stumble. Those who would cause them to go away, that's the opposite of those who would welcome them in and bring them to be a part of the group, to welcome them into the family. We need to look out for those people. We need to purposefully engage them and love them into his people. As Jesus' followers, we've got to give special concern to the little ones. And this is precisely because they're not valued by the world. We should be the ones leading the charge to love the unlovable, to touch the untouchable, to reach the unreachable. That's what we're called to as Jesus' people, to love those that are most in need of it. We can't let them go unnoticed. Can't let them be not cared for, not looked after, not welcomed. One of Satan's biggest tactics is to make people feel alone. And most of the time, these people, the little ones, the insignificant ones, the despised, the rejected, the outcasts, they are lonely above all else because nobody does anything with them. They always feel left out, always feel excluded, always feel unloved. And Jesus says that is not the way that we should be about it. So they, above all, should be the ones we target and make to feel welcomed. Too many times we think, well, if we could just get an influential person to become a Christian, they could reach this big audience that they have and do great things for the kingdom. There's truth to that. If a big-time celebrity leaves a life of sin and becomes surrendered to Jesus, that's newsworthy and it gets around. A lot of people hear about it. Did Jesus ever once say, target the influential among you? No. He says, welcome the children, look out for the little ones, welcome them. That's what Jesus did. When you look at Jesus' life, when you look at Jesus' ministry, he always went after the little ones. The insignificant, the people that we wouldn't think Jesus would go to are the ones he went to. He often went to women. Women were second-class citizens at best in first century Judaism. Really, most first century cultures around the world, that's just the way it was. I mean, in reality, women have been second-class citizens until truly recent history. That's just the way the world is. It is still that way in a lot of parts of the world. But for Jesus, he often reached out to women. He went to the lepers that people wouldn't even touch or go near. He went to the woman at the well. Not only was she a woman, but she was known to be a promiscuous woman, to be with lots of men. I mean, so she had to be out there kind of by herself when nobody else would be there at the well. And yet Jesus talked to her. The woman that was caught in adultery, Jesus reached down and touched and was with. Jesus always went out to the poor, to the children. He didn't go right off to the Pharisees and the chief priests when he was looking for some leaders of a movement. He called fishermen and despised tax collectors and the small, obscure group of zealots. Like all these non-mainstream people, Jesus went out to. All of the non-influential people, Jesus reached out to. So I want to encourage you to be intentional about noticing children and other little ones. We can't welcome them if we don't notice them. We have to be looking for them. You don't accidentally see things that you're not looking for. It's very rare when those things happen. We have to purpose to say, Lord, I want to notice the people that you notice. Help me to see like you see. And when that becomes our prayer and that's our heart's desire, you're going to be amazed at the people you begin to notice. Think of it this way. How many of you have ever gotten a new vehicle, not necessarily a brand new car, but a car that's new to you? And then what happens instantly? You see it everywhere you go. You might think you've never even really heard of a Honda Odyssey until you realize, we've got some little kids, we buy an Odyssey. Next thing you know, every vehicle you see is a Honda Odyssey. That's just the way that it goes. Because now this thing is on your radar. It's not that there's any more on the road, but it's come into your conscious awareness. If we can get the little ones to be on our radar, we're going to see tons of opportunity. And in terms of advancing the kingdom, you don't do it by reaching the masses intentionally. You reach the masses by reaching the few. That's what Jesus did. That's what he always did. And you see it even just as one example. Paul went off, and when he gets to Philippi, he goes to somewhere that he supposed there might be a place of prayer, and he found a women's prayer group. And that's where the spread of the gospel started in Philippi. A great Roman city there. It spread, and great things happened because he started with a group of women that were off praying. That's just the way of God's people. So be intentional about noticing the little ones, and when they show up there, welcome them in his name, receive them, and let's see them become a part of what God is doing, and primarily through Grace Point. Let's pray that God would bring us little ones that we can minister to and love and make them feel like they're not little. Make them feel the way they're valued by God. Now, once we've welcomed them, we need to protect the little ones. We need to deal with the causes of stumbling for them, the things that would cause them to fall away, because so often there might be a person or a family or something that comes in and they visit for a week or two. They don't really feel welcomed, and nobody reached out to them, nobody loved them, people just kind of ignored them, and so they never come back again. And then they say, well, we tried that church thing and it really wasn't for us. Or we gave Christianity a shot, but it just didn't pan out. Those people, they just didn't even say hi to us. How awful. May we never be those people. We got to make people feel welcome. There's all kinds of stories of people who visited a church and then they either get ignored or they get bombarded with, oh, honey, you shouldn't come to church dressed like that. We need to get you some new clothes. Or a young man that maybe was on the streets comes in, it's like, what? Excuse me, why is your hat on in the sanctuary? If you're going to come to church, you need to learn to take your hat off. Really? You're going to cause them to leave over a hat? Come on. Jesus calls us to welcome people, not cause them to leave. Because people that come, they're looking for somewhere to belong. That's why people get in gangs and all the things they do, because they want a sense of belonging. We're made for that. And when they come here, they better feel it. Because if they don't, Jesus is going to be really upset, to put it mildly. And we don't like Jesus being upset. Look at the warnings he gives here. He uses very, very strong language. And yes, it's hyperbole. He's exaggerating to make a point. He's not saying that you should really hang a millstone around somebody's neck and throw them in the water. We're not returning to the mobster days. Nobody's going to be sleeping with the fishes. None of that kind of stuff. But Jesus is absolutely making a very morbid warning that there will be severe consequences, and I'd be willing to say he's probably actually understating what would happen to those that caused the little ones to walk away from him. And then when he talks about the issues of temptation, again, he's talking about things that would cause a little one to fall away because of your sin. Hey, Jordan, hand me that book. And this is one of the things that brings it into such sharp focus. I just want to read it. This is he write in his commentary. He says, the habits and attitudes that Jesus has in his sights in this passage are as hard as any. Now listen to this. Cutting off the hand that refuses to give to the poor. Cutting off the foot that refuses to walk to the soup kitchen to help out. And in particular, plucking out the eye that refuses to notice the weak, the vulnerable, the helpless all around us in our cities, on our streets, in our wider world. All these pose a challenge every bit as severe today as the day Jesus first issued it. Those are the types of causes to sin that Jesus is talking about. The ones that would cause us to neglect the little ones. The eyes that don't see them, the hands that don't reach out to care for them, the feet that won't approach them. That's the stuff we need to be thinking about. Those are causes of sin, yes, but they're causes of stumbling, not just to us, because what makes the little ones leave, but when they continue to be unnoticed, when they continue to be mistreated and neglected. And Jesus is saying if we let that happen, the results will be catastrophic for them and for us. So how can we protect the little ones from being caused to stumble? Number one, what we've just been talking about. Welcome them. Love them. Make them feel accepted. Make them feel loved. And not just in an obligatory sense, but in a real sense. Like that we really love them. We really care for them. There's a place where Paul, I think it's in Colossians, he speaks of a heartfelt love. It's really a love from the gut, from the intestines. Like there's a felt thing, a feeling of love that's there, that's got to be present. We say things like, well, I love them, but I don't like them. I love them, but I don't want to be around them. Then you don't love them. You don't. I'm just going to have to call that one. If you don't want to be around them and you don't want to spend time with them and you don't like them, you don't love them. When you love people, you want their good and you want to influence them, and that comes through being with them. That's what Jesus demonstrated for us. So we need to make them feel loved and welcomed so that they won't go away. They won't leave when they feel loved. They won't leave when they feel welcomed. They won't walk away from Jesus then when they feel like Jesus' people are actually loving them like Jesus does. Secondly, actively engage them with instruction, with mentoring, with helping them grow in their faith, helping them mature, helping them develop the fruits of the Spirit. Bring them all along aside you in your walk with Jesus. When we talk about following Jesus together, we really mean that. Like, you need to bring somebody along with you and say, hey, you want to follow Jesus with me? I'd love to help you walk with him. Let's do this together. Teach them to read the Word. Teach them how to pray. Pray with them. Read with them. Study with them. Go witness with them. Help them talk to their neighbors. Help them reach out to their family. All those sorts of things. Take them under your wing and love them. Disciple them. And then how can you deal with some of those causes of stumbling in your own life? Lord, what is in me that's unpleasing in your sight, and what is in me that might be causing others to fall away? It takes some intentional introspection, some self-reflection, some looking on the inside. And as Pastor Gina hit earlier, that means being in some silence, being in some solitude, turning the TV off, turn the phone off. Just put it, you can turn it off. It has a power button. It's there. Use it. Just turn it off. There was a day before cell phones. You'll live without it for a few minutes. But you won't live without a few minutes of silence in God's presence on a regular basis. We need that. But in order to get that, we've got to cut things off. We've got to get alone and say, Jesus, what is in my heart that you need to deal with? And then listen. After a season of listening, maybe get in the Word and see where He leads you, what He highlights to you that needs to be dealt with in your heart. And He'll expose those things, and you ask Him about it. Ask other people. Ask your close friends that are believers, that are mature believers, what they see in you. If there's anything they see, or what they see, or how they see it. Again, I've said this often, I'll say it a lot more. If you're married, ask your spouse. Without being defensive, without saying, well, here's your list. Nope. Just ask, listen, keep your mouth shut, make notes, and then just go pray about it. Even if you disagree, that's okay. Just listen and go pray, because a lot of times that's what blind spots are. Blind spots are things we don't see. Obviously, we disagree with it if we don't think it's there, but that's the only way we can grow. And then you've got a plan to grow. You got a plan to deal with these things. What does Jesus talk about? He says, if your hand or your foot is a problem, cut it off. You have to be intentional. You don't accidentally do that. You got to go get something. You got to figure out, how am I going to do this now? And then you got to do it. If your eye is the problem, he says, tear it out. Just say, you know what? I'm going to deal with this thing, and you do something about it. If there's sin in your life, find the cause to it and take aggressive, decisive action to deal with it. Have to be intentional. We can't just hear things and say, oh yeah, I need to do that, and then never do it. We have to do it. Jesus is always issuing calls to action. Because we've got to protect the little ones. We have to. That means we have to deal with the causes of sin in our own hearts and our own lives that would lead them astray. We have to look out for them. Thirdly, we need to rescue them. We need to go after the wandering. Those that are wandering off. That's what this is about here. Jesus is not talking here about reaching out to a lost person. He uses this parable in other ways in some of the other Gospels, but here in this context, Jesus is using it to talk about getting the one that is wandering, the little ones. He says that. Because it starts off, see that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. What do you think? And he goes into the parable, and then he finishes it saying, so it is not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. And if you go back to verse 6, it's one of these little ones who believe in him. We're talking about believers that are saying, forget that. I'm just out because nobody really cares. Nobody loves me. Nobody's engaging. I gave it a shot. I'm leaving. We have to go after them purposefully. And it's crucial. It's vital. Because the little ones are often unnoticed. And if we don't notice them, how are we going to recognize they've left? How are we going to recognize they're gone if we never noticed they were here to begin with? We have to notice the little ones because the Father doesn't want any of his little ones to miss out on life with him. He doesn't want to see that happen. It is expressly not the will of the Father. So we need to notice them in their absence as well as in their distance. When we see the little ones becoming more distant, we've got to take notice of it. We've got to know as we go up to them and just love them and just say, hey, I've noticed you're kind of, seems like you might be pulling away. You seem a little withdrawn. Is everything okay? We've got to do that. If we're in relationship, we will see those things. We'll notice them. If we're not, we won't. But we need to notice it. And again, it starts with welcoming them into the community. That's how we notice. That's how we can see. How does a shepherd know if his sheep have wandered? He counts them. You don't notice one's gone unless you count. You don't notice somebody's wandering unless you're paying attention. You see how this all really revolves around getting eyes focused on the little ones, the insignificant ones, the excluded ones. Because if we aren't engaged with them, we won't notice them wandering. And if we don't see them wandering, how can we reach out? We won't. But how can we reach out if we don't know their phone number? Do we have phone numbers for the little ones among us? Do we know their address? Have we ever been to their house? Have they ever been to our house? Do they have our number to call us if they need someone to talk to? This is where the rubber meets the road. Talking about building real, loving relationships. Jesus wants us to look out for the little ones. We've got to be intentional. If we're going to rescue the wandering, we have to have means of connecting. Because what if all of a sudden you realize they haven't been here for a couple weeks, you haven't seen them at life group, you don't think they've been to anybody's house to pray during the week? How do you even connect with them if you have no means of connection? We've got to. We've got to connect with people. So develop relationships. Develop relationships with genuine love, genuine concern, genuine compassion. And if you struggle with that, ask the Lord to deal with your heart, because He wants to. He wants you to have that as a part of your character, as a part of who you are in Him. And if your will is lining up with His will, you can about guarantee it's going to be done. He's going to help you grow. That doesn't always mean it's going to be easy. Any change is hard, because that means certain things in you have to die. New things have to break ground and come to life. And those can be challenging processes, but they are so good when we become more like Him. But develop those relationships, because that's ultimately what's going to motivate us and encourage us to reach out and get them, because we care about them and we don't see them around. We notice they're wandering, and then we're going to want to go grab them and love them and bring them back in. And when we do that, there's a party in heaven, and the Father is rejoicing, and there's all this joy and excitement, because the insignificant ones are being treated like they're significant. The devalued ones are being valued. The overlooked ones are being looked out for. And that is what Jesus has called us to as His people. So I want to encourage you to open your eyes. Open your eyes to see the little ones. To see the ones that the world would prefer to not see. The ones the world tries to hide, to cover up, to push off to the side. Let's get them a place over here so that we're here and we don't have to see all that stuff. And let's love them. Let's welcome them. Let's make sure they stay in and protect them from causes to sin and fall away. And if we see them wandering, let's be the ones that go out and rescue them. Be the rescue squad that goes out and gets them and brings them back, so that we can see the Father's joy renewed, see Him excited and celebrate, and we will rejoice in joy with Him and with the Son and with the angels. And it will be an amazing thing as we see these little ones continue to come back and stay in the family of God's people. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we thank You so much for Your heart and Your care for the little ones. We thank You for Your heart for us, because so many of us were little ones, where there was nothing to warrant any significance about us, nothing about us that would cause people to take notice or give us attention. but you loved us, and you welcomed us, and you gave us your attention, and we can't even fathom why. But you love us because you made us, and you made us in your image. And I pray that you would help us to see that every human being is made in your image and valuable and worthy of dignity and respect, worthy to be cared for. I pray that you would open our eyes to see the little ones just as you did, to welcome them in your name, to protect them from causes to lead them astray, and to rescue them when they wander, because they need to be with you and your people. And I pray that they would feel so loved that they would never even consider wandering away. May you fill us with your Spirit. Do these things in us and through us to love your people, to further your kingdom, and to glorify your great name. Amen.